Welcome to This Sustainable Life. This is Michèle Watson. Today I'm with Joshua Spodek. Josh is a professor and coach of leadership and entrepreneurship at NYU and Columbia Business School. He holds a PhD in astrophysics and an MBA from Columbia, is a #1 best-selling author of Initiative and Leadership Step by Step, is host of the award-winning This Sustainable Life podcast, and a 3-time TEDx speaker. He has run 6 marathons, rowed 1, and competed at the world and national levels of ultimate frisbee, swam across the Hudson River twice, has done over 175,000 burpees and counting, and written over 4,000 blog posts. He hasn't flown by choice since March 2016 and has picked up 1 piece of street trash per day since April 2017 and takes 2 whole years to produce a load of garbage. As you can hear, Josh is a very well-rounded person and has an impressive list of achievements. Josh, the one thing that really interested me was what you mentioned in the podcast you had with your coach, Dov Barron, where you say that the reason why you started your leadership and the environment podcast was, and I quote, "Help transform one of the biggest problems of our time into one of the greatest chances for personal growth and development. They will have to overcome challenges, but doing so will wake them up to emotional reward and happiness, to replace the internal conflict they are suppressing, which I think eats them up inside." So you mentioned that was the reason why you started your first original, the Leadership and Environment podcast, and now this has changed to the Sustainable Life podcast. And I was just wondering, can you give us a recent personal example where that was the case for yourself?
Oh yeah, and I really love that quote that you picked. I mean, I've talked a lot on the air, and that really captures a lot of it. I've probably written it more succinctly, but then you get to edit. And it's funny because you didn't pick up why I started acting on sustainability, but why I started the podcast. And it was really because of my actions on sustainability. I found that I myself expected this is going to be horrible. When I challenged myself to go without packaged food, I thought, this is New York City. There's great restaurants everywhere. And if I'm not getting stuff that, I was going to avoid restaurants in that time. What a terrible sacrifice I felt like I was making in terms of not getting to eat the best cuisine in the world, or, up there with the best cuisine in the world. And after I did it, I found I was eating more fresh fruits and vegetables. I was saving money. I was having more people. This was before the pandemic, so more people were coming over. And most of what I thought only came from restaurants, I was getting more of. And I was getting definitely closer with my family, especially my sister who was out in Queens, and I was learning cooking from her and ordering from a CSA and shopping at farmers markets from her and my mom. And why did I expect that it was going to be horrible? I could easily point to the reasons. A lot of things in society of comfort and convenience. Have someone make the stuff for you. And you can't possibly make good stuff. And it must be progress. Oh, all right. I'm going to give you an example of something that I realized recently. I don't know. See, you're not in the United States, but United States, there's a lot of tomatoes that are available 12 months out of the year, shipped from, I think, California. And they're well known for looking bright red. They look perfect. And when you taste them, they don't taste very good. They taste like they have the flavor of cotton. And then separately from that, we have heirloom tomatoes. And heirloom tomatoes are only ripe, late summer. And they're more delicate, they look weird. But they taste amazing. I mean, they taste like mangoes, and it's impossible to describe. And I used to think before doing all this, those people with their tomato talk, they're so annoying. God, it's just like, eat a tomato. And at the time when I was eating lots of Doritos and ice cream, the difference between them, I couldn't really discern. Over the years, as I've eaten less Doritos and less ice cream and, all of the associated stuff that made me numb to the taste of it. Like I had tons of salt I would barely taste. Now a tiny little bit of salt is a lot, and tons of sugar I wouldn't really taste. But now a tiny little bit of sweetness is a lot. I don't put sugar in stuff because it's too sweet. And so it's late summer, or it's midsummer now, and the tomatoes are starting to come out. I'm eating the tomatoes, and I'm eating what we'd call heirloom tomatoes, and I love them. I mean, they taste so much better. They taste to me sweeter than fruit used to. Like I've had this whole shift. Ice cream I can't eat. Fruit now tastes sweeter than ice cream, and vegetables taste sweeter than fruit used to taste. So my old yoga teacher invited me to do this thing with the students she works with. They're like 10, 12, 13 years old. And we met in Union Square at the farmer's market. And we walked around and picked up garbage together. She wanted them to learn, to meet someone who picks up litter together. And she bought me a tomato while we were there. She's like, here's a tomato for you. She bought everyone a bunch of cherry tomatoes who were snacking while we were eating. We were snacking while we were talking after picking up the litter together. And all these kids are swarming around. At first they're like, what do we do? What do we pick up? And then they start picking up or start seeing how much more litter there is. When you don't look for it, you might not see it. But when you know and you start picking it up, it's unbelievable how much litter there is on the ground. Anyway, that's an aside. Back to I'm eating this tomato and it's wonderful. And this is an example where I was before saying, what's the point? All tomatoes are tomatoes, no big difference between them. And I couldn't tell how much more nuance and subtlety and complexity and what amounts to overall joy and deliciousness of an eating experience there is in fresh, ripe vegetables and fruit. And here's something I realized recently. What did they used to call heirloom tomatoes?
Tomatoes?
Tomatoes. All of the stuff that we call progress in technology and greater efficiency has led to 12 months out of the year tomatoes, but they don't taste as good. And we've now labeled the thing that used to be normal as the weird thing. Not weird, but like that's the thing that needs an extra label, heirloom. Yes. And we call the technology, I'm a fan of efficiency under a greater goal of a better life. So, but we've created these tasteless and I think nutritionless things that look similar, but they're not as good. And so this is a case where I expected before, I didn't want to be one of those people, but now I realize one of those people is actually how we used to be.
Yeah, that's a very important point. We actually should be going back to our roots, I think, because some people don't want to go back to the Middle Ages or old times because we think progress, technology is so great. But maybe they're missing the point that some old ways or simpler ways of living are actually, like you say, full of joy and unexpected qualities that you only discover when you go on challenges, when you try things out.
Yeah, I just did a post on the Olympics. I read that 10,000 athletes participate in the Olympics, in the Summer Olympics. And I'm guessing for every athlete, there's 10 fans and support people and family that come with them. So if they're all flying, I'd guess roughly something like going across the Atlantic or going across the United States. And so I went onto some site that calculates how much greenhouse gases are emitted. And I think it came up with just rough back of the envelope. It was 500,000 tons of CO2 emitted. Now, I'm a huge fan of sport. I think it helps people discover their potential and often go beyond their potential. I think it crosses boundaries to create connections between different cultures and promotes peace in this way. I think it's fun. But do we need the Olympics to do that? Do we need hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 emitted for it? And I thought, how could we achieve the same effect otherwise? Well, how about everyone who watches actually go out and play a game outdoors themselves instead of watching TV?
Yeah, that would be good.
How many people who watch the Olympics have played a team sport or challenged themselves to achieve something on an individual level in the past month or 12 months? We could do that. We could watch less TV and produce local drama, stage productions. We could listen to less other people's music and sing and play instruments ourselves.
Yeah, I think maybe going back on like you were saying, the technology or what was the word you were saying for the tomatoes? Streamlining things.
Efficiency.
And efficiency has made things tasteless in a way, or has lowered the quality of life. We think some people maintain that it's increased the quality of life, but actually, like you say, for the tomatoes specifically, it's lowered the quality of the taste and the nutritious side of it. But I think all the technology has also allowed us to become very passive livers of life. I don't know how you would express that. But yeah, instead of watching sports on TV, to remember that actually playing sports gives you a lot more joy and benefits than watching the sports. So like you said, yeah, maybe the Olympics should be something not to be watched, but something to be participated in on an individual basis, like in everyday life.
That's a big shift in my life, is to be more active. Instead of paying for a ticket to fly me somewhere where I'm almost guaranteed to have some sort of adventurous experience and to see something new. Once I challenged myself to go for a year without flying, I felt like, oh, I'm going to miss out on all those things. But a couple months in, I realized, well, if I want adventure or cultural exchange or cuisine or all the things that making money, because I at the time I believed I needed to fly to make money. I believed I needed to fly to connect with my family. And so for a year without flying, I thought I was going to sacrifice many of the best parts of life, some of which I thought were that I really liked, some of which I thought were absolutely necessary. And this is weird, I'm talking this way because every single person I speak to says, oh, you can, but you see, it's different for me. I can't do that. And, there's all these other people who are underprivileged and they can't do what you do. And this is the addiction speaking. It's like almost no one in the world flies, but the people who do fly all know other flyers. And so they think it's necessary. So it's just picking one of these things, adventure, but a cuisine or family, all of these things, as I said, I don't want to go without these things. How can I create more otherwise? And I found that I could create more by actively doing these things. I didn't intend to go a second year when I went for the first year. I didn't even think I'd make the first year or even the first month. Well, I can go for a month without flying trivially, but I didn't think I'd make it very long. And now it's just every year I say, that was another best year. Let's go for another. And increasingly, I expect I'll never fly again, not because of any sense of deprivation, but on the contrary, a sense of greater community, greater connection to family, greater control over my career, more adventure, more cuisine. And I don't believe I can put into words. There's some things you can only experience. I think I can't describe how great an heirloom tomato tastes. I mean, I can try, but I don't think it'll give you the feeling of tasting it. And then even people who taste them are like, even people who know they're going to get something special are like, whoa, that's crazy. I mean, some people don't like tomatoes, but then there's, other things.
Yes. I was just wondering when you were mentioning that you're no longer flying. And I remember you saying that you started to learn how to sail. So how are things going on that side? Have you been sailing further or?
The way it began, so I realized I wasn't going to get off North America. I guess I could technically go to South America, but I wasn't going to get off North America if I didn't learn to sail, because I'm not going to go on a freight line either, a boat. So that leaves sailboats. And so I took some sailing lessons. This was before Greta came over. And I also had a bunch of people you'll see a bunch of sailors on my podcast. That's because I was connecting with the sailing community. And because I'm not going to buy my own sailboat. And I've learned now that they're sort of Airbnb type sites, except they're for people who want to sail somewhere and they have space for an extra person. An extra person on board, I guess, is like a nice way to pass the time. And then people who want to sail, who don't have boats, and you can pair up. Okay. So I found that if there's a place you want to go and you don't care when, it's easy to find. If there's a time you want to go and you don't care where, that's easy to find too. But if you want to go to a specific place at a specific time, there aren't that many sailboats sailing from one place to another. And so I took the sailing lessons, and I can't say I fell in love with sailing in the way that I've fallen in love with some of the other things, but I definitely like it. And the 2 summers after I learned to sail, I think it was 3 years ago in the spring. And that summer and last summer, I joined the sailing club. So it's Manhattan. And so there's these yachting clubs, which I always thought when I heard yacht, I think the Kennedys and it's all rich. And I was totally wrong. I had all these preconceived notions that were, every place where there's ocean, there's people who sail. Some are rich, yeah. Some are poor, and it's their only way of making a living. And so this place is, you pay a certain amount for the summer, and you can, any day you want, as long as there's a skipper, someone who really knows what they're doing, going out, and there's space on that boat, you can go out with them. And so someone else maintains the boats and so forth. And, it's a fair amount of money. But compared to how much I was paying for flying, I was saving a lot. And here's what I found. When I get on a sailboat, I take a the subway to the marina. Then I'd go to the sailboat. And sometimes I'd be on the subway and I had lots of stuff going on. My mind would be all frantic. I'd be hurried and think, oh, I don't have time for this. And then the boat would go away from the dock and everything disappears. It's just a different time scale. It's about the wind and the sun and the currents and the other sailboats. And there's also ferries and power boats around too. So we have to be careful about those. I was invited to speak at this conference in Tulum, Mexico. And I was trying to work. I was going to take the train down to Florida and then take a boat across. When I spoke to non-sailors about my plans to do this, it didn't work out in the end. But they would say, where are you going from? Where are you going to? How long does it take? When are you going to go? The usual questions we ask about travel. When I talked to sailor, they would say, is that hurricane season? What are the tides at that time? What are what's the sunrise and sunset? And these questions, I think, yeah, if you burn enough fossil fuels, you can power your way through anything. I guess you can't take a plane through a hurricane, but you can go at any time of day, however you want. You just burn enough fossil fuels, you can do a lot of things. There's an elegance and a simplicity and a joy, the wonders of nature, to go with nature and learn what I don't know. I've since learned a lot about tides, and I've learned a lot about the moon. And in physics, I learned about how tides work with gravity and differential amount of gravity at one side of the Earth versus the other. But that's different than actually planning when you're going to sail. And I like that. Does that mean I can't do anything I want, whenever I want, however I want, no matter who pays, no matter who suffers at the other end? Yes, it does mean I can't do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want it, and ignore that someone is breathing in the toxic fumes and someone's displaced from their home to drill for the oil and so forth. I can't do that. Yes. I love it. Future generations will not look back at us with envy at how, when we heard about some party in LA, we just flew across the country to go to the party with nary a thought to anything else. They will recoil with horror at how we gave lip service to saying other people, our relationships with our family and other people, and especially those least fortunate who are powerless to protect themselves against anyone, including ourselves, doing something that would hurt them. That we give lip service to those things being our values. And yet what we actually do is say, F that, let's do, I want a hamburger. I want to fly across the country for this party and I'll come back on Monday for work. No problem. Why wouldn't I? That we would choose our whimsical desires. Great if you're a child, but as an adult, I like what responsibility and accountability has brought to my life. I don't want less of those things. These things, when I choose not to fly, I'm not thinking of myself missing out. I'm thinking of my connection to the people who would suffer. That's what's meaningful in my life, is my relationships with other people, as well as with wildlife, but people more. Am I giving up? I don't think so. I'm not a parent, but so I can't speak out of personal experience, but I don't think parents, when they become parents, feel like they've lost, like it's a net loss, that they can't go out and party and get drunk whenever they feel like it. I don't think that, I'm not going to have a kid to find out just that, but people with pets, which is a lot less than having a kid, they'll leave something fun to go and, if they have to walk the dog. And they're not like, oh, poor me. They're like, when I chose to get the dog, I chose to take on this responsibility. This other life depends on me.
Yeah, and that like the other side of the responsibilities, you get a lot of joy from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, the alternative to flying is not sitting in my home, staring in the corner, doing nothing. That's what everyone thinks. I don't know what everyone thinks, but I think I feared, like, well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to do something boring. But here isn't boring. Here being wherever anyone is. Yeah. And anyone who thinks it is, the marketers won on that one. They've convinced many of us, including myself for almost my entire life, that over there, somewhere else is always better. That's craving. They've convinced us, they've led us to crave what we don't have. And they're the gatekeeper that we have to pay to give us what they've gotten us to crave. Now, of course, there's value to traveling. I'm not traveling. I'm just not flying. So then they give you flying. I mean, here's how much of the economy does the following represent? They give you a message through advertising and so forth to make you want something that in the delivering of it makes you want it again. It both satisfies what you wanted, but then you want it again. I mean, it's certainly the case with cell phones and things that we gamify, the case with salt, sugar, fat, and convenience. With traveling, when I hear bucket list, I hear craving. I want what I don't have.
I think maybe doing a more sustainable kind of travel usually also slows us down, and in the end it allows you to enjoy the actual journey, the actual traveling time, whereas before, when you're flying, well, in my opinion, is not the most comfortable thing to do. So you actually just want the traveling part to disappear because you want to already be there and you're not enjoying the actual journey. Whereas now, if you're going to go on horseback or you're going to walk or cycle or sail, you're actually going to, well, because it's slow and takes longer, you kind of have no choice but to learn how to really enjoy the traveling part. And because it's slower and takes longer, you have more opportunity to make discoveries and enjoy more things.
Yeah, Marco Polo is known throughout as a historical great traveler. And there's most 5-year-old Americans who fly have traveled more distance than him. So who's the more traveler? The 5-year-olds who have gone twice the distance that he ever did, or him?
I think he traveled more in life experience in a way because it was more intense.
Because he was traveling, he wasn't paying someone to just take him from one place to another. And it was funny, I was thinking about, in America, we learn about our founding fathers and the Jefferson and Franklin. They were ambassadors, I think, to France. Like I kept reading about Benjamin Franklin in France. And they were getting around. They weren't traveling like we were, but they were taking the boat across. They were sailing.
Yeah, they were. It's actually quite funny to think. It's like, how long did it take them to do that?
Yeah, they weren't saying, "Oh my God, this is horrible that we can't go faster." And they were going across an ocean. Now, I was in Paris many years ago at the Musée d'Orsay. I think it was Musée d'Orsay. Anyway, I saw a painting of, it was Paris from above. I think it was done around 1800. I forget the exact date. It's a painting of Paris from above, from a hot air balloon. High tech at that time.
Oh.
And I can't say exactly, so I'm speculating here, but I would guess that not many people got to go up in the hot air balloons. And I bet the people who did go up in them were like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. It's like lighter than air. We're above the air. It must have been amazing. The height of everything, the height of human experience, I bet they felt. Nowadays, no one wants to go up in a hot air balloon, and people want to go up in a rocket. But I think that the experience that they're getting in the rocket was basically the experience that they had in the hot air balloon. Slight difference, but the magnitude and value was probably as great. Like they probably had the similar feeling of risk of death, similar feeling of status. So if humans can feel that from going up in a balloon, then they can do, if they could get that experience then they can get that experience now.
Yes, definitely.
Like we don't have a less effective emotional system. Our emotional system is the same now as it was then. We have the ability to get that thrill, that everything. And for that matter, if they could get it in the hot air balloon, they could get it from climbing a tall mountain. I suspect that the net joy and experience of Bezos, and his peers' life is probably less than people in the past who are polluting far less, because he's dependent so much on technology, and on top of that, he has to look away from the pollution that the technology is causing. Now, you could say someday we have to get off Earth because maybe there'll be the dinosaurs went extinct and we don't want to go extinct. Okay, I'll grant that. But that's like on a tens of millions of year time scale. We don't have to do it right now. And the fastest, most effective way to get that is for us not to feel we have to desperately escape a planet that's about to become, that's losing its ability to sustain life. But if we reach a sustainable level and we do this on a measured pace, we'll be much more successful. Desperation rarely helps, especially in big projects. Desperation is like the most unattractive and unhelpful emotion to guide someone. And that's what we're doing, is trying to get Mars desperately. If we reach sustainability and then do it methodically, I think we'll be more successful in getting there. And I don't think we have tens of thousands of years I think NASA has mapped out the asteroids that could hit us. People are being desperate for no reason.
Yeah, and also I think if, wherever you go, there you are. If we don't manage to live sustainably here on Earth, even if they do manage to, go on Mars or another planet, they'll just bring old unsustainable habits to the new planet, and that's not going to help anybody really. Yeah, ideally you should learn how to live sustainably here first, and then using that knowledge, if you want to go exploring for the sake of exploration, go and do it, but do it in a sustainable way. Everybody will benefit from that kind of approach.
Yeah, and all the people who think, if we get to Mars, we'll grow there and eventually we'll become sustainable there. Well, if you think you can become sustainable there eventually, then be sustainable here. They definitely think they can be sustainable in the rocket ship over, where it's like a couple people in a self-contained pod or whatever, spaceship. They know they have to be sustainable on the spaceship. So if they can be sustainable there, why not be sustainable here? And if we can't be sustainable here, why would we think we can be sustainable?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this sustainability. I think one of the big problems is because we're living in cities that are way too big. Whereas if you go back to living in smaller communities, smaller villages, and learning how to go back to living sustainably, because we used to, that surely would be part of the answer. And like you said, if you manage to be sustainable in a rocket, then you actually do have the knowledge to do it now as well, in a bigger setting, but maybe there's a maximum size at which we can live sustainably as a community. I mean, an ideal size of village, or beyond which we shouldn't go.
That I've been wondering that myself. There's a book I read that talked about how the Polynesians discovered Hawaii something like 1,000, 1,500 years ago. And they traded for a while. And then at some point, for reasons unknown to us today, they stopped trading. And so the Hawaiians were on their own. And then in 1830, I think Captain Cook, a European, found them. So in that time, 500 to 1,000 years, roughly speaking, they were living sustainably. And it's speculated that roughly 300,000 people were living there when Captain Cook arrived. So if they lived for centuries, at least, sustainably, it seems that 300,000 people can live sustainably without the internet or, coordination, figuring out how to do it beyond just, apparently, the author of the book, J.B. McKinnon, was on my podcast. He said that when the Europeans arrived, they found that their legal system punished, if you stole something or some crime of passion, apparently, this is what he said, is that the crimes weren't punished. They're fairly lenient with that. But if you fished in the off season from the place where you weren't supposed to, or you touched certain wildlife, or you muddied or dirtied the water that was like the clean water, then it was severe punishment. So very heavily regulated. But it worked.
Well, they knew what was important. I guess that we've lost track of that.
Yeah. And it seems that it's possible that over a certain number, the coordination becomes too difficult. And it may be that that's my speculation, is that over a certain number, we don't have the capability as a species to coordinate our behavior enough to cooperate on a global scale. So the question, if we can do it at 300,000, can we do it at 1 million? Can we do it at 1 billion? Can we do it at 7.9 billion, where we're just about to hit now?
I guess it's more a ratio of people to surface area to the actual area where you're living. Or, if you live in a tropical area, you can grow more food than if you're in a subarctic area. So, your geographical location will also determine the number, the population density that can be supported sustainably.
Well, it'll tell you the number that can live sustainably. If you
you
get
make
over
it on
that
the
number,
whole planet.
Yeah, so if you have one place that's living sustainably and another place that's growing without bound, then the place that's growing without bound will take over the other place.
Right, but I mean, like if you were trying to figure out a sustainable number, you'd have to figure out for every different area, you'd have to find that number and find a way to get there.
The issue is staying there. Somehow the Hawaiians were able to keep their numbers at below what was the limit.
Yes.
And many other populations have done that as well. Europe has not done that. Europe, the culture has spread out all over the world with a growth mindset that keeps going beyond. Plus, I'm not picking on Europe. Whatever, I mean, the Industrial Revolution happened and the growth mindset has taken over, and it's encroaching everywhere. Everywhere that it can go, it's going. So there may be places that were sustainable, and Hawaii was 300,000. I think now it's 1.3 million, something. So it's over 1 million. So it's definitely 3 times higher, but maybe 4 or 5 times higher than it was before. Sustained through fossil fuels, which is to say over the limit of what the land and the sea can sustain. So that's not sustainable. So it's somehow a group that wasn't from Hawaii came to Hawaii with fossil fuels and is now living unsustainably there. Is that number so high that we can't say, oh, we've overshot our limit, let's back down a bit?
Yeah, we have to find solutions to that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to. I mean, we can not figure it out, and then nature will impose limits on us. I mean, we know what will happen. I mean, we'll run out of some limiting something. And if it's not water or fossil fuels, then it'll be clean air. You know, we can ultimately, if we're burning fossil fuels, we get pollution. I think you have to do it is an engineer question. Is the limit on fossil fuels what's left in the ground? Or is it how many people die from breathing? I mean, like something like 10 million people, I think 10 million people died from breathing air in, I think, 2018, 2019. So at some point, the pollution becomes too great and more of us are dying than living. Civilization can't sustain itself. That could happen. But let's say we switch from fossil fuels into other things. There's always a limit that if we keep growing, we'll hit. I mean, if nothing else, if we just went to fusion and fusion had no side effects, it still produces heat. And if you do the calculations, this is getting a little geeky, but if you look up, one of my favorite blogs is Do the Math. It's this professor, Caltech trained at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. And if we keep growing at 2%, 2.2% per year, I think was the number. And if we have totally clean energy, at some point, just because of the second law of thermodynamics, we overheat the surface of the earth, not from global warming, but just from side effects of heat that we can't get rid of. There's no, we have limits. There are natural limits that we cannot get past. And if we reach those levels, it'll be harder to stop then. And if we can stop then, why not stop now? What's so great about 7.9 billion? Why not 2 billion? Where, that was 2 billion. We had Einstein, Mozart, Shakespeare, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Jesus, Buddha, pretty great stuff. And only very recently did health and longevity catch up to what it was before agriculture. We can, signs of health, longevity, prosperity, abundance, stability were greater before. They're lower now. Everyone thinks it's the opposite. I mean, it was definitely, people lived much shorter for most of Western history, but there are plenty of places where there's death in childbirth, but then if you made it past childbirth, you made it to 60 on average, something like that. I don't know, look up the details, but it wasn't people dying all over the place at age 35 like it was I think in the 18th century it was like that here in America and Europe.
Yeah, no, they had a pretty short lifespan. which is quite scary to think, I'd be dead for quite a while. So in a way, I am glad that I'm living in 2021.
Well, it's going back down again. You probably would have been happier to live in the late 20th century when life longevity was increasing, but now it's decreasing, at least in America, and not just because of the pandemic.
If we go back to the environment, and it's obviously very important for you, what specifically does it mean to you? Like when you speak of the environment, is there any particular memory you have? Something that comes up?
Well, it's a funny question for me now because it's become everything, and not everything, but a big priority in my life. So the things that I started off with have been augmented with more and more and more. So like, if you asked me that question a couple of years ago, I would not have mentioned heirloom tomatoes or cherry tomatoes. And now I do. But if I go back far enough, certainly there's the sledding hill that I talked about on my third TEDx talk. And there's, it's something that I don't talk about that much, but almost a lot of people on my podcast, when I ask people that question, is there's a wistfulness of a childhood carefreeness. I guess because when I was with those, I don't know, somewhere where I saw a bunch of kids playing, and they're just running around in circles. They're just running around in circles. And they're having a great time. And I was also reading a post of mine from a while ago where I pick up my vegetables every week from my farm share, my CSA. It's a church / high / community center. And on Tuesdays, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., they drop off the vegetables and I can go pick up my share.
Okay.
There's a gymnasium next to it that's a cafeteria / gymnasium. And these high school kids play in it. There's no windows. They're running around in a basement.
That's sad.
Yeah. So what's so great about a really high population, if it means that we're paving over in Washington Square Park, in the southwest corner, there's a gymnasium and some hills that, if you squint and look, you'd say, oh, cool, bunch of green grass. It's astroturf, it's plastic. We've made something that looks like grass, but is actually plastic. It's actually poisonous. It gets in our veins. And on the edge of the grass, it's actually dirt because there's too high density of people there, because if you have too many kids running around without enough green space, if it's plastic, well, the plastic lasts forever, a long time, so they don't wear it out. But then immediately, once the plastic ends, there's no grass there because there's too many kids on the astroturf. So once they step onto the grass that should be next to it, or should be the whole thing, they wear it out. Instead of building more parks, we make the parks that we have, we cover them in plastic. Look like grass, but it's not grass, it's plastic.
Wow. No, I didn't realize it got to that point.
It's everywhere. I mean, all over. If I see a green, grassy field, like a football field or a baseball diamond, it usually means it's plastic. That's normal here now.
Okay. No, I'm very happy that I'm living in Switzerland and we're not. I mean, there must be some astroturf, but I haven't really noticed it anyway. We still have the lawn mowers going around, well, the electric ones that go on permanently in the football fields. So, yeah, we still have grass.
So I have this joint, to answer your question, there's this joint thing of like running around, carefree. I still try to think of, I can't remember now. Me and my friends in high school, we'd meet and play American football, touch football. And it's a violent game. So why weren't we getting injured? How were we running around and not getting injured? We just were. And I remember some of the guys that we'd play together, one or two of them I didn't like. Like I hated them. They'd make fun of me. They were popular and I was nerdy. And yet we would play football together. And it was great. I have good memories of that. And I remember the other day, we got chives, I think, from my CSA. So I hadn't had chives in a while. I'm chopping them. And it reminded me, when I was a little kid, we had onion grass. I don't know, there's just grass that it tasted oniony.
Okay.
And I remember just finding it in random places. I was like, oh, there's onion grass. And I'd nibble on it a bit. And now, I guess I was in Central Park a little while ago and I saw some wild strawberries growing, but not enough to eat. And that was our world before. It was just, there's delicious things all over. and beauty everywhere. And now you have to search for it.
So is it more like you're feeling freedom, or, I mean, you speak with it fun?
Fun is a really big part of my life, because most of my life hasn't been particularly fun. And my life, I believe, has become much more fun. I mean, there's times when I'm focused and working, but even then there's a fun to it. But that's a different kind of fun. It's a carefree, I would say liberated, except liberating implies that I was trapped first. So it's untrapped in the first place. I'm not liberated or free. It's more like, how do I put it? How do you say that you're free without implying that you were ever once trapped? That's what it is. It's like open.
Expansive?
Expansive. It's carefree. I mean, I'm feeling like that's how we evolved. Go back to our ancestors 100,000, 200,000 years ago. But I don't know what it was like living then. I wasn't there. But just, I unleashed, but that implies leashed in the first place.
Yes.
This is interesting. I'm glad you asked this question. I haven't really I'm going to take a while to find the right word for it. It's not liberated because I wasn't trapped.
Yes.
It's natural, I guess.
Or maybe, so I had a word, but it's not unconscious, but innocent?
Innocent? Yeah, it's an innocent. Although that has this tinge of guilt attached to it.
Yes.
It's not ignorant. Free. It's just, I think of running around and having fun.
And if you were to...
Maybe fun is the word.
Fun, yeah. Because having fun, you don't really think of the opposite negative thing. So you're saying basically that your link to the environment, to nature, is something fun.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on what you just said about this feeling of fun, I invite you, at your option, to think of something that you could do to act on those feelings.
Before we recorded, I knew this question was coming.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I wonder if I should prepare. And a bit before, I'd started to think of, I'm trying to get my apartment off the grid, and at least for several months out of the year. So I was buying some solar equipment to, in Manhattan, to go be off grid. I thought that would be really cool. I think that would be really cool, but it's not that fun. Whereas when I've been going out and singing outdoors, it's more fun. And so now I'm thinking of, can I do something that is just to go out and just do something fun? Actually, 2 nights ago, I met someone on the High Line, and we found 3 nights ago. Recently, I met someone on the High Line, and there were some berries that were growing. And someone looked them up, and they're chokeberries, which are edible. They don't taste good. They're very astringent. They're not sweet.
What kind of berries? Sorry?
Chokeberries.
Okay, I've never heard of them.
And I can give you the genus and species if I look it up online. And it turns out that they are. See, now I'm looking up. You got. Aronia is the genus. And then there's several different species. So they're native to America, and they're very stringent, but they're also extremely high in antioxidants. So they're very healthy. Last night, I was walking around my neighborhood, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go back and eat some chokeberries. And the first time I was kind of scared, because what if they're wrong and they're like hemlock and super poisonous? And actually, the people I was with were like, do you want us to contact any kin if anything goes wrong? I was like, I'm on the High Line. I'm sure they're planted, and therefore no one's going to plant poisonous berries. The legal risk would be too great. But now that I know they're healthy, it's fun. Like foraging is really fun, and I love finding more and more berries and things like that. So I'm trying to think of something I could do to do something fun. I rode my bike out after I had Catherine Garcia on my podcast, and she was talking about Gateway National Park. So I rode my bike all the way out to Queens and the ocean. And that was kind of fun, but it wasn't like carefree. It wasn't, I mean, I found some mulberry trees out there. Berries are just, I love berries. So maybe just going and picking berries for no reason. I mean, I go for a walk every day to pick up litter, and I sing every day. Picking up litter isn't fun. The walk, could I do something? What would be something I could do that would be really fun? I've been meaning to contact some friends and go throw the Frisbee in the park because I used to play Ultimate Frisbee. Frisbee's throwing plastic around. I feel a little funny about the plastic now. But I don't know if it would be too small a thing to consider to get together with some friends and toss the Frisbee around. I mean, when I ask people to be on my podcast, I have a rule. There's a couple things. Like, it has to be new, something you do yourself, not telling other people to do it, and it has to have some physical, measurable, you don't have to measure it, but some physical component. And so if I got together with some friends and threw the Frisbee around in the park, that would be definitely fun. And I've been meaning to do it, so it would qualify. I'll leave it to you. You're the host this time. To get together with some friends and
I think and you're not using power or fossil fuels or electricity, or you're not polluting. If you keep your Frisbee forever, then you can hand it down to your nephew, and he can hand it down. And
well, I have the Frisbee already, and they do break after a while. Like, eventually, the plastic degrades and they crack. But if that passes, then yeah, I would get together some friends to toss the disc. I'd ride my bike up to Central Park, unless they were all downtown, which they might be, in which case I'd find a park closer and toss the disc around. I haven't done that in a while. Actually, it's been a couple of years because we didn't over the pandemic. So it's been at least 2 years. If that qualifies, then that's what I'm going to do.
No, I think that qualifies. And for how long would you be willing to commit to that?
Well, we don't have to do it once for it to be fun.
Like how often and for how long? And
I think I'll do one. I mean, I'm going to say one time doing it, because I'm pretty sure that if I contact a few, then they'll go for it. A second time might be hard to get people together.
Okay,
I'm going to do two. One with my old teammates, and then one with people who aren't Frisbee players. At least one other person who's not a Frisbee player. It could be my nephew or nieces, or it could be other friends. It's funny throwing a Frisbee when you're really good with people who aren't, because I want to throw farther and faster. And it's not as much fun because I'm always chasing the Frisbee that they never throw to me because their aim isn't as good.
Well, I guess you can call it a workout.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah, I'll have to find the fun in that. Of me chasing a Frisbee around.
So when should we, how long do you think you'll need to skate to do that twice?
Let's see. It's late August. It's late July. I can't force them to work on my schedule. So I'd say a month. If we talked in a month, it would have happened between now and then.
Sure.
I could probably do it within a couple of weeks.
Oh, lovely. So
I'll definitely commit to a month, and I'll try to do it earlier.
Okay, great. And then you'll just have our second conversation and see how that went.
Yeah, I have a feeling it will be time that I would have spent in front of the computer that I'm not spending in front of the computer. And I think I'm going to find it more rewarding. I suspect I'm going to say something like, I should have done this before.
Well, I certainly hope so. Well, thank you very much for helping me do this first podcast. And I'm looking forward to hearing how the Frisbee event goes. And
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to hearing how future episodes go.
Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners? Any additional point?
There's a couple. I mean, one is, check out my blog, check out my podcast at joshuaspodek.com. And the other is this fun is, oftentimes I could give a message of all this, I have a lot of messages of living more sustainably, but I'm just going to share that I thought at the beginning it was going to be hard and a burden, and I was taking one for the team, and it was a big sacrifice. I really thought that. And I thought, we just need more fusion and that'll answer everything. And I got a PhD in physics, I got an MBA, I know business, I know science and technology, I know markets. And I was totally caught off guard. I wish I'd made the switch earlier. I wish I'd started connecting with people and wildlife and nature more. And the more that I do, the more that I like doing it more. So I want to frisbee around a little bit. It may not sound like the biggest change in the world, but it's the joy, there we go, fun and joy, that I think the biggest effect, whatever people debate over whether it's a bigger effect to not fly or to eat less meat or to have fewer kids, all those are individual. The biggest effect is how much we lead others. And if we think what we're doing is miserable, it's very difficult to lead people to do miserable things. I'm not leading, to the extent I'm leading people, I don't believe in any way I'm leading them to misery. I believe I'm leading them to joy and fun, community, freedom, and finding the joy and fun in these things is, I think, the most important thing to do. Don't stop there. By no means stop there. Don't do one thing and be like, good, I did my part. And it's go find the fun, learn, then do more, and then lead others to follow. That to me is the recipe of joyfully living sustainably. So I hope that comes across.
Oh, excellent. Well, on that great note, Joshua Spodek, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.